articles about exotic holidays just for people of a certain age, and interview with an incident actress, yes, and an article about free early guides cycling across north of England. My ears picked up. Now that sounded interesting.
Okay, Miles, thank you very much for that. So it starts off by saying one day I was sitting in our conservatory. So straight away you can tell by just reading this extract that the person who's actually narrating this is the person who's actually in this story. So one day I was sitting in our conservatory. Conservatory is like an extension to the house. So conservatory usually is kind of made of glass, the ceilings and the walls are also made of glass. So it's like an extension at the back next to the garden where you can get more sun coming in and you can see the garden as well. So someone had left a copy of Saga magazine on the coffee table. Now, for those of you who are too young to know about such things, Saga magazine is for people who are retired. Retired people are those people who will keep your camera on, please, Marceline. Thank you. Saga magazine is for those people who are retired, who get to the age of like 60, 70 years old, and who are kind of pensioners. And they decide at that age that, look, they're too old to carry on working, and then they retire and they do other things. I mean, there are people who retire when they're quite young, if they make their fortune maybe and they can self-sustain themselves, then you can retire pretty much at any age. But in this case, we're referring to retirement being for slightly older people. So this magazine gives advice and information to older people about health, hobbies, and holidays. So I wasn't retired, but I was coming up to 60 years old and thought maybe I should have a look at this. So I opened it with trepidation. Trepidation means nervousness, expecting to find articles about mobility scooters. You know, mobility scooters, you might see them sometimes for old people who can't walk certain distances, and they have a mobile scooter which works electronically, and other joys of old age, but I was wrong. So as he went through the article about exotic holidays just for people of a certain age, an interview with an ancient actress, and an article about 3 elderly guys cycling across the north of England, my ears pricked up. His ears pricked up, that basically means it sounded interesting and it caught his attention. Okay, so let's move on to the next paragraph. And let's go to Mursaleen for this.
I had messed around with old cars for years and had started to get bored. In reality, going out into the garage in the middle of winter to tinker was losing its appeal. As I was feeling the cold more than before. About the same time, I had noticed lots of happy-looking chaps whizzing past our gates, all gate-clad in lycra and riding the latest road bikes. Wouldn't you mind a go at that? I thought. I had noticed a scheme at work that helped people to buy a new bike, so I inquired, and before very long, the old car was sold and a fancy-looking touring bike took pride of my place in the garage. The gears changed differently from when I first rode a bike, and the clothing were like something from the future. I started off round and round the block until my confidence returned, then up the road out of town, 5 miles, 10 miles, and eventually out into the hills. So what next?
Good reading, Mursaleen. I just read the whole of your message. How are you feeling? Are you okay?
Yeah.
All right, go on then. Go and have your medicine where you need, okay?
Okay.
But good reading though, well done. Good lad. I just read the rest of your message just now. I didn't see the last bit, sorry. Okay, so this particular narrator, the person again who's in this story, who's actually narrating the story as well, had been using old cars for years, and he that was his hobby, and he basically got bored. So remember, he's 60 years old now. Going into the garage in the middle of winter to tinker with was losing its appeal, as I was feeling the cold more than before. At the same time, I'd noticed lots of happy-looking chaps whizzing past our gate clad in lycra and riding the latest road bikes. So when you see some professional cyclists, a lot of the times when they got those racer bikes where they're kind of, you know, they're curving over like this onto the handles, and they've got tight clothes on, that's what we call by lycra clothing. And why do they wear lycra clothing? It's because it sticks to your skin very tightly, which means that it will kind of keep you warm in a sense. But at the same time, when you're cycling, you don't want to have so many loose clothes because of the aerodynamics. So when you're cycling at 20, 30 miles an hour, you don't want to have too many loose clothes that kind of are flapping around. So you want something skin tight with lycra that will kind of keep you warm, but at the same time be more comfortable for you when you're cycling through the wind. And because he had noticed so many people cycling past him wearing this lycra, he didn't mind actually having a go. So he noticed a scheme at work that helped people to buy a new bike. So he inquired. Before very long, the old car was sold, and a fancy-looking touring bike took pride of place in his garage. The gears changed differently from when he last rode on the bike, so that must have been a long time ago when he last rode a bike. He started off going round and round the block until his confidence returned, but then up the road out of town for 5 miles, 10 miles, and eventually out the hills. So what next? It just shows you that he started off slowly with small distances, and then he increased his distances over the more experience that he actually got. Okay, so let's go to Meda for the next paragraph.
Hi.
Hi, Meda. Are you okay?
Yeah, how are you?
Very good, thank you, Meda. Go ahead.
I photocopied the Coast to Coast article carefully, leaving off any references to where it had come, and showed to my two younger walking friends. Andy also cycled and was keen straight away. Dave hadn't seen his bike for years. He thought it was in the back of his shed, which was full of gardening equipment and children's toys. The Coast to Coast is a cycle ride from Whitehaven to the west coast of Lake District to the Tynemouth, which is close to Newcastle. The Irish Sea to North Sea is a distance of 140 miles. Crossing feels like the Lake District and the Penny Hills. None of us have ever cycled that far before. We needed to do something about it.
Yeah, so he photocopied a Coast to Coast article, which was possibly in the magazine. Didn't worry about where it came from, because remember, it was like he thought it was for older people, which it was in a sense. And Andy also cycled and was keen straight away. So Dave hadn't seen his bike for years. He thought it was at the back of his shed, which was full of gardening equipment and children's toys. So the Coast to Coast is a cycle ride from a place called Whitehaven on the west coast of the Lake District. And the Lake District is just close to, it's on the west side of England, close to Wales, and to Tynemouth, which is close to Newcastle. So it's all the way from the west coast to the east coast, to the northeast coast. That's where Newcastle is. The Irish Sea to the North Sea, a distance of 140 miles, crossing the fells of the Lake District. And remember, Pennine Hills and Lake District is a very hilly area, very scenic, very beautiful, but a very difficult place to actually go bike riding. But when you do go bike riding and you're cycling, you want to go cycling to a place which is kind of scenic at the same time. So you can get that fresh air and nice scenery when you're kind of cycling through and cruising through as well. All right. Okay, so moving on to the next one. Let's go to Elena for the next one.
The following Tuesday, Andy and I took our bikes out on a 20-mile evening run. On Thursday, we went spinning at the local leisure centre. Spinning is a strange activity. It comprises of a room full of static exercise bikes facing the instructor, also on a bike. Basically, this very thin lady plays loud music and shouts at you to pedal harder and harder. Saturday morning, we practiced climbing up and down for some local hills. This went on for several weeks until the big one, 45 miles around the Trough of Bowland. It was wet and cold. Dave had finally extracted his old mountain bike from his shed and joined us. Needless to say, he struggled to keep up. The next time we saw him, he had a brand new bike and had been secretly practicing.
Okay, well done, Lena. So the following week, Andy and I took our bikes out on a 20-mile evening run. So that doesn't mean that they were running physically, but they were actually on a bike run. And by Thursday, they went spinning at the local leisure centre. Spinning is a strange activity. It comprises of a room full of static exercise bikes. So you know these cycling bikes, gym bikes that you have that don't actually move, but you just cycle on them. And then they have an instructor also on a bike. A lot of the times they're playing all this loud music and they're shouting to pedal harder and harder. So as the music gets faster and faster, you start pedaling harder and harder and harder. And it kind of motivates you because you have so many other people in the room that you're trying to get your target and trying to see how far you actually get within that exercise time in the gym. Saturday morning, we practiced climbing up and down some local hills. So remember, they're practicing at the moment. So this went on for several weeks until the big one, 45 miles around the Trough of Bowland. It was wet and cold. Dave had finally extracted his old mountain bike from his shed and joined us. Needless to say, he struggled to keep up. The next time we saw him, he had a brand new bike and had been secretly practicing. So let's see what happens next. Okay, so the next bit, let's go to Emma for the next bit. Hello, Emma.
Hi.
Hi there, how you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Well done. Good lad. Go ahead.
The big day arrived, and all three of us were quite apprehensive as we ate our tea in a local pub. We stayed in a bunkhouse on a farm near Penrith. Early the next morning, the farmer loaded up our bikes and drove us 65 miles to the start. It seemed a long way in his car. How on earth were we going to cycle back? After having a photograph taken with our back wheels in the Irish Sea, we set off to the local DIY shop as the handlebar tape began to unwind from my bike. Next, we got lost cycling out of Whitehaven, and a local resident had to redirect us. Not a good start.
Yeah, so they finally reached that big day, and all three of them were friends. They were quite apprehensive, quite nervous, as they had their tea in the local pub. We stayed in a bunkhouse on a farm near Penrith. Early the next morning, the farmer loaded up our bikes and drove us 65 miles to the starting place. Obviously, that must have been quite far. They had a photograph taken with our back wheels in the Irish Sea. So they had the photograph of the Irish Sea behind them. So just for future reference, they know where they were. We showed the friends. So we set off to a local DIY shop as the handle tape bar began to unwind from the bike. So that's not good. So you don't want the handlebar bar tape unwinding, especially when you're cycling, because that can be a really big distraction. Because remember, when you're cycling at certain speed, and you cannot have distractions, because if you get distracted, then there's a chance that you could have an accident. And then they got lost cycling out of Whitehaven, and a local resident who was there at the time had to actually redirect them to the correct route. Okay, Emma, thank you for that. Okay, and let's go to Obaid. We'll have Obaid read the next bit. Hello, Bait, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Can you see the text properly?
Just give me.
If not, I'll come back to you, okay? Don't worry. I'll come back to
Yeah,
you. I'll come back to you in a minute. And let's go to Barbara for this one. Obed, I'll come back to you in a second.
Hello?
Hi, Barbara. Go ahead.
Okay. The Lake District was splendid as usual. The sun began to shine and the wind was behind us. The first 10 miles or so were a steady climb towards the fells. We knew this would be difficult. We ground our way up the steep slopes and flew down the other side of each one morning. We were glad to the hearty breakfast we had eaten before setting off. The Susteren cycle route was well marked and followed of lovely quiet lanes. Soon it was time for a coffee and a cake. Why else would you go cycling? One last big descent and we found ourselves in Keswick, picking up the old railway line, which led to swift progress. Another coffee stop followed, and then, as it started to rain, bang. Dave had a puncture at speed flying down the hill. Puncture repaired, we soldiered on, eventually arriving back at the bunkhouse for a hot shower. So far, so good.
Okay, thank you so much, Barbara. So in this case, the Lake District was splendid. Anybody here been to the Lake District at all? Send me a message. Anybody been to the Lake District? Nobody yet? Okay. All right. So, well, it's some place that you may want to go to in the future. Actually, we have somebody. Who do we have? Omiza has. Okay, nice to know. Omiza. And Mursaleen says he's probably been as well. That's good. Let's go to Omiza then and find out from her what the Lake District is all about.
Hi.
Hi, Omiza. What was your experience like of the Lake District?
I actually don't remember, but like my dad was just like right in front of me, so I just asked him.
Okay, right. You can't remember at all?
No.
Probably when you were quite young.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, well, you can ask Dad afterwards as well, and he'll tell you. It's a very scenic, very, very beautiful place. Probably one of the most peaceful and beautiful places in the UK that you can go to, and it's very popular with holiday makers as well. But there's a fair amount of walking to do if you get off the car, because if you're climbing these hills and mountains, and there are lots of rivers there, waterfalls, really nice fresh air. You have, lots of farm animals there as well. And it's a very nice place to go. So, and they actually went there cycling. So the first 10 miles or so were a steady climb towards the fells. And they knew that this would be difficult, but we ground our way up the steep slopes and flew down the other side. So they're going up and down the hills, basically. Up and down became the pattern of the morning. We were glad of the hearty breakfast. That means they had a big breakfast. They needed that because they needed the energy. And the cycle route was well marked and followed lots of lovely quiet lanes. So in the Lake District, you have lots of cyclists and they're all marked as well, that you can follow these particular lanes. Soon it was time for coffee and cake and a break, and one last big descent, and we found ourselves in Keswick picking up the old railway lines, which led to swift progress. Another coffee stop followed, and then as it started to rain, bang, Dave had punctured at speed flying down a hill. Puncture repaired, were soldiered on, eventually arriving back at the bunkhouse for a hot shower. So far, so good. So if you do go for these long cycling tracks, you need to know how to change a tire or even just mend a puncture, because otherwise you'll be stuck. Okay, so let's go to Jessica for the next one. Hello, Jessica. Hi, Jessica. Can you hear me? Okay, Jessica, have a read of this, please. This, starting from the next day, was much shorter. Okay, Jessica, I think you need to sort out your audio because I can't hear anything at all. Could you look into that? Thank you. Thanks. Let's go to Usaid. Hi, Usaid.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Well, good.
Very good. Go ahead.
The next day was much shorter, but started with the mighty Hartside. This was a long, steep climb up from the Eden Valley onto the Pennine Hills. Our legs were tired from the day before, and the going was tough. We were rewarded at the end of this climb by fantastic views and yet another cafe. Each steep climb was followed by a high-speed downhill section. At one point, I managed to record 40 miles per hour for Andy to do 41. So the day went on until we reached the hostel and we were to stay at that night. We celebrated completing day 2 with another meal in the pub. I fell asleep very early.
Thanks, Usaid. So the next day was shorter, so things were getting easier but harder at the same time because they now were climbing up the Eden Valley onto the Pennine Hills, which is a very steep, in fact. So our legs were tired from the day before and the going was really tough. They were rewarded at the end of this climb by fantastic views and another coffee stop. Each steep climb was followed by a high-speed downhill section. So climbing up takes a lot of energy, but going down, the descent, I mean, that's much, much easier. At one point, they managed to record 40 and 41 miles altogether, the narrator and Andy. And so the day went on until we reached the hostel. So they were staying at a hostel overnight. Hostel is a place, it's like a hotel, but a little bit more informal in that sense and much cheaper as well, especially when you just want a night's sleep and a night's rest. And they had a big hearty meal at the local pub as well. Okay, so good. Let's go to Ubaid again. Let's see if the system is working.
Yeah, should I start?
Yes, please.
The final day was a very quick 50 miles, mainly downhill on old railway lines now used as cycle paths. When we reached Newcastle, we thought we were finished, but it was still another 10 miles to Tynemouth and the sea. We were glad to dip our front wheels in the North Sea for the final photo call before the farmer picked us up and returned us to our cars. What a challenge it was. Who said I was getting old?
Well done, Ubaid. Thank you so much. And that was it pretty much. So they final day was very quick, 50 miles, because I think they could see the ending. And because it was mainly downhill, it was much easier and much quicker. An old railway line now used as cycle paths. When they reached Newcastle, remember Newcastle is in the northeast of England, they thought that they were finished, but it was still another 10 miles to Tynemouth and the sea. So they were going towards Tynemouth on the coast. So they were kind of glad to be on the North Sea, and they took a final photo there. The farmer picked us up and returned us to our cars. What a challenge it was. Who said I was getting old? So a person who's in his 60s, worried about the fact that he was getting old, and maybe there were certain things they probably couldn't do. Maybe there were certain challenges in life that weren't going to be there ahead of time, because it happens to people when they get to that age. Sometimes they do worry, even though they come into retirement, they do worry how they pass their time. And a lot of old people, depending on health, of course, want to feel lively and young. And what an exercise, what a task to take on hand. And you can see why it's called Coast to Coast, because it was coast from the west of England all the way to the northeast of England. That's where they ended up. Okay, So now we've had a good read of this passage and we've gone into it into a lot of detail. But how many of you actually read this passage like we've covered it today? How many of you actually read it in this much detail, going through it from start to finish? Because at the moment, I'm finding that some of you are struggling in comprehension questions and not able to actually answer them accordingly. And that's probably because you're trying to skim read, or you're looking at the questions and just trying to find the answer without knowing what happens at the beginning, what happens in the middle, and what happens at the end. So you need to know the story inside out before you actually go and attempt the questions. So please do take your time when you're answering these questions as well. Anyhow, let's go towards the questions. Let's answer them. So one day I noticed someone had left a copy of Something magazine in the conservatory. So let's answer these questions as we're going along. Find out what they are. So let's go to Sahil for the first one.
Hello.
Hi, Sahil.
Hi, how are you?
Can you just unmute yourself, please? Thank you very much.
Hello. Hello.
How are you?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, my mic definitely muted itself again.
Okay, that's fine. No problem. So just read the sentence and tell us what you think the answer could be.
One day I noticed somebody had left a copy of magazine in the conservatory. Choose the correct option. Is it a saga magazine?
Yeah, so it was called the Saga magazine. That's right. So S-A-G-A. Well done. That's good. And while you're here, let's do another one, please, Sahil.
Okay. It gave advice to readers about health, hobbies, and holidays. Choose the correct option. It gave advice to older readers.
Yeah, so it gave advice to old readers about health, hobbies, and holidays. Good. Thank you, Sahil. And let's move on to the next question. And let's go to Amiza for the next one.
I read about 3 men, something across the north of England. Choose the correct option. Is it cycling?
Yep, so I read about 3 men cycling across the north of England. Okay, that's how we got the idea of going on this, or starting cycling first of all, and then going on this particular trip. And have a go at this one as well, Amiza?
I shared the article with my something friends. Choose the correct option. The walking.
Yeah, so his friends at the time, the exercise that they had and the socializing that they did at the time was not cycling, but it was walking. Correct. Thank you, Amiza. Let's go on to the next question. Let's go to Muslim. Hi, Muslim. How are you feeling?
I'm okay.
Good, good lad.
The coast to coast is a cycle ride from something to Tynemouth. Choose the correct option. So from Lake District to Tynemouth.
Okay, very good. And let's do another one.
Tynemouth passes to the city of something. Choose the correct option. Tynemouth passes to the city of Newcastle.
Well done. Good lad. Thank you, Muslim. Okay, let's go on to the next question. And let's go to Ayan for the next one.
Hello.
Hi, Ayan.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm alright. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Ayan. Ayan, you sound a bit tired today. Did you go to school today?
Nah, I'm gonna start next week on Monday, but I woke up a bit early because I'm trying to get back into the routine.
That's a good idea, actually. Yeah, that's good. Well done. Make sure you stick to the routine in the next few days.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to do. That's why
Okay, go ahead.
To prepare for the big ride, we went something at the local leisure centre. Choose the correct option. They went skimming. Pretty sure it's something like that. Hello? Hello?
Can you say that again?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. What was the answer?
Spinning.
Spinning, okay. So spinning is when you're cycling really, really fast and following some music and an instructor in the gym.
Yeah.
I've never tried it, but I've heard it's very good exercise. And let's do one more, please.
During the big ride, at one point, going down a steep hill on my bike, I managed to get up to just over something miles per hour. Who said I was getting old? Choose the correct option. Is it 40?
Well done. So he was going over 40 miles an hour. Thank you, Ayan. Let's go on to the next question. And for this one, we'll go to Barbara. Hello, Barbara.
Yeah.
Hi there. Can you read the question?
Yeah. Why did the author open the Saga magazine with trepidation? Choose the correct option. He expected articles about mobility scooters and things to do with old age.
Yes. So he was a bit reluctant at first to open up the magazine because he thought it was just about old people and there'll be lots of boring things like mobility scooters in there and old age. But to his surprise, he got some interesting information. Let's go on to the next question. We'll go to Ara for this one.
Hello.
Hi Ara, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. My ears pricked up. What is meant by this phrase? You thought something was interesting? Oh, yeah, B.
Yep, so something caught his interest. That's when his ears kind of pricked up because he wanted to pay attention and listen carefully and read. And let's have a go at this one as well. Let's read the question first.
Oh, yeah. Why was messing around with old cars losing appeal for the author? D.
He was feeling cold when he was out in the garage, that's correct. And he was complaining about the fact that he was feeling cold as well. So, well done, Ara. Thank you. And let's go to somebody else now. Do the next one. Let's go to Farhana.
Hello.
Hi, Farhana. How are you?
Good.
Good. Read the question.
Why do you think the author described cycling clothes as something from the future?
Yeah, so why do you think the author described cycle clothing as something from the future?
Is it B?
Because it was strange and something like an alien would have worn. Why do you think it was? He found it strange?
Because it was like tight on his skin.
Yeah, because it was like lycra material, which was really tight on the skin. And he had never worn it before, and you can imagine if you were to wear that for a first time, especially if you're in a position of a man, you'll probably feel a little bit uncomfortable. So, good. Thank you very much, Farhana. And let's go to Elena for the next one.
Hello.
Hi, Elena. Hi there.
Why do you think the author carefully left off all references to the magazine where the coast-to-coast article had come from. Choose the correct option.
Why do you think he carefully left off all references to the magazine? In other words, he didn't want to know that it was part of this magazine where the coast-to-coast article actually came from. So why did he not reference the magazine when he was talking to his friends? In other words, why did he not mention the magazine?
Is it B? Is it B?
So he didn't want to put his younger friends off by showing them a magazine directed at older people. Yeah. He didn't want him put himself in the spotlight by mentioning a magazine for older people to his younger friends. So he kept that quiet. Elena, let's do this one as well.
Okay. Andy was keen straight away. What does this mean? Choose the correct option. Is it A?
Yeah, so keen means he was interested straight away. It caught his attention, it pricked his ears. Well done. Good, thank you, Elena.
Thank you.
Okay, and for the next one, let's go to Mide.
Hello.
Hi, Mide, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Okay, Mide, read the question.
None of us had ever cycled that far before, and we needed to do something about it. What needed to be done? Choose the correct option.
Yeah, so they had never cycled before, but they needed to do something about it. And what was it that they did?
C, lots of practice.
Correct. Lots of practice. And Mide, just do this one for me as well.
Okay. Why do you think the author describes spinning as a strange activity? Choose the correct option. D, it was strange riding bikes that don't go anywhere.
And what was spinning?
Pardon?
What does spinning mean, spinning? So you know spinning is when you're in a gym and you're on a bicycle.
Yeah.
The bicycle is not actually going anywhere even though you're spinning.
Okay.
So even though you're cycling and you're moving your legs, the bike is static.
Yeah.
Because it's like one of those health bikes where you just do exercise. Okay, so
Okay.
if you ever hear of spinning classes taking place, spinning classes refers to cycling without moving you're moving the pedals, but you're not actually going anywhere. But it's pretty good exercise. Okay, Mide, thank you so much for this. And,
Thank you.
Thank you. And let's go to Jessica and see if Jessica's microphone is working. Hi, Jessica. I can hear you now. How are you doing?
Good.
Very good. Just read the question.
What does the latest
Yeah, so what does the author mean by the Lake District was splendid as usual? What do we think that means?
The scenery was big.
Yeah, well done. The scenery was beautiful. Thank you very much, Jessica. And we're on the last question now. And for our last question, let's go to who should we go to? Oh, let's go to Omiza. And just read the question, Omiza.
For PE, we have.
What do you think heart side could be? Choose the correct option.
Yeah, so what do you think heart side could be?
Is it a steep hill?
It is a steep hill. Well done. Hartside was actually a steep hill that they went down right towards the end. And the last bit, when they were coming actually down the hill towards the end, was the easiest bit, because it was just 40 miles of just going downhill, basically. So you just had to make sure that you're nice and relaxed and your brakes are working and you're just gliding down. Okay, so well done. Also, Meda, I'm just going to come to you very